What class is the best blaster in all of D&D? If we devoted all of our resources to doing as much area of effect damage to multiple enemies every round, just how much devastation could we cause exactly? Today, we're going to try and answer these questions and more, and I can't wait to share the results with you. Welcome to D4. Hey everybody, so here at D4, that stands for D&D Deep Dive, by the way. DDD, D4Ds, D4, okay. I like to do character builds for my favorite role-playing games. I like to crunch numbers about them. I like to theory craft about them, not so that I can tell you the right way or the best way to play a character, but to explore one potential way to build something in the hopes of creating a character that's both really fun, but also really powerful to play. So if you also enjoy building characters for your favorite role-playing games, or if you just like theory crafting, or if you're just looking for tips or ideas on how to build something that you're thinking about playing, then welcome home. This is where you belong, 100%, and I'm so glad you're here. So thank you for watching. My name's Colby. So a few weeks ago, I did a Sea Druid Tempest Cleric build, right up here if you missed it, that was focused on multi-target area of effect damage. In that build, for the first time ever, I decided that, hey, if I am averaging damage over a 4-round combat encounter, then maybe it was time to just let myself actually use my spell slots when calculating average damage, outside of just like, a big concentration spell or something. I think it makes sense, especially since so many of us tend to only have 1 or 2 combat encounters per day, and even for those of us who are having more than that, I think it can be really useful to know what a build is really capable of if and when we need to pull out all the stops in a tough fight, right? It probably comes as no surprise then that after that video, the build that went to the very top of my to-do list became an ultimate blaster build, a caster that uses the best area of effect spells and abilities in game to just go all out on massive multi-target damage in a combat encounter. Now, this isn't a new concept for this channel by any means. My first attempt at an AoE blaster was years ago with the Evocation Wizard. I think that build was really strong, but its focus, and generally the focus of any AoE blaster character historically on this channel, has been for burst damage, right? Nova, how much damage can we do in a single round of combat? Back when we could get action surge and throw out multiple fireballs in a round, for example, it kind of made sense to, look at our limited resources like spell slots as things that we would maybe use just for burst or nova damage. But as burst damage has been pretty significantly nerfed under the 2024 5e rules, and as I've been changing the way I think about using limited resources and doing it kind of over a 4-round combat encounter, once per day, I think it's time to see what we could really do with a build over an entire combat encounter when we were focused primarily on just wrecking as much destruction to as many enemies as possible round after round. Oh, and some good news for those of you who constantly ask for this. The build today is going to be a straight class build. Yeah, though I will throw out some suggestions for alternate paths and for multi-classing options, we're going to beeline to 17 on a full caster today. So, are you ready to jump in? I proudly present D&D episode number 218, the Master of the Elements, the Horseman of the Apocalypse, Blazing Saddles, Napalm, a Fistful of Fireballs, the Mare of Boomtown, M-A-R-E, Mare, get it? The Divine Soul Sorcerer. That might be my favorite. The Horse Puns. Whew. Everyone in the Discord server just killing it as usual, but I think I'm just going to keep it a little more boring and a little less punny and go with the Master Blaster. Sorry, I think it just gets more clicks. And come on, that's still a good title. Mad Max, anybody? Right, huge thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton for the fantastic artwork that he put together for the build today. He does this every week. If you'd be interested in following Randall to check out the other stuff that he's done, or to potentially, reach out and try and commission him to create some art for your character or even your entire party, I'll put links in the video description, as always, on how to do so. But first, I am really excited to welcome a new sponsor to the channel this week, a 5e compatible book that's in Kickstarter right now called Pilgrims of the Empire's End. Okay, listen up. If you're a fan of Dune, or like things inspired by the Ottoman Empire of old, or maybe even stories by Jorge Luis Borges, you are going to love this book. Pilgrims of the Empire's End gives you a way to fuse the mythical elements of fantasy with political intrigue, all set in a gorgeous desert landscape. And it's fully compatible with both the 2024 and 2014 5e rules for those of you who haven't made the transition. The time of Carcharash is ending, and the vultures are already here. Watch as your players play or get played by a myriad of political factions in an attempt to make the Empire rise again, fight for the ruins of its former glory, or reject the tales used to blind the common folk and become enlightened desert sages. Travel through the vast mystical deserts of Idahar, cross its snow-capped peaks, and sail through the seas and the rivers of the continent. Experience its numerous cultures, or utilize the efficiency of the conductor's realm, avoiding the heat of the arid deserts. Inside this book, you're going to find a ton of cool stuff. First and foremost, a brand new class, yes, the Scion, quite different from the Unearthed Arcana version that WotC dropped recently. So if you were looking for something a little more unique and like mental, you're going to love this Lucid Dreamer Mystic. But in addition to the Scion class, they've got 15 plus unique subclasses, including the Dervish Monk. It looks so cool and way different than other monk subclasses currently available in official 5e material. There are new playable races or species, over 100 new enemies to fight, including what they're calling monumental monsters that have an entire game system for fighting them. It gives me some real like Shadow of the Colossus vibes. You guys remember that game? So cool. Anyways, 80 plus new magic items, 30 plus new spells, and more, all brought to you with really gorgeous artwork, some of which you've been seeing on display here. So please, go check out Pilgrims of the Empire's End. The Kickstarter ends July 20th, so there's less than 2 weeks left at the time of this video release. Get there before it's too late and help them reach their next stretch goal and take advantage of all the goodies that you can get by backing them while they're in Kickstarter, right? When you do, I would appreciate it if you'd use the link that I put in the video description and in the pinned comment so that they know I sent you. Thanks for doing that. And a huge thanks to Desert Hussars, the makers of this book. It looks awesome and I can't wait to see the finished product. Okay, let's get back to the build. All right, at level 1 for our starting class, and indeed for our only class today, we are going sorcerer. That's right, surprising very few, probably. I think the sorcerer is the best single class blaster in D&D. I'd probably argue that they're the single strongest class in the game, period, for that matter. I made that argument with Chris, Triant Monk, in our 2024 5e preview video a while back, and I don't think my thoughts have significantly changed since then. I appreciate that wizards have a better spell list, and that alone might be reason to argue that wizards, still top the charts. But in that case, maybe you could argue that the lore bard wins, right? Anyways, to me, the inclusion of metamagic, innate sorcery, and a spell list that's almost as good as the wizards, among other things, kind of put sorcerers on top. But definitely for pure blasting, I think they take home the prize, as we will discuss. To be fair, when I came out with my light cleric build a few years ago, I argued that light clerics might be the best overall area of effect damage dealers in the game. Check that out up there if you haven't seen it. It was a good one. But as good as they are, I do think sorcerers get a slight edge in this category, depending on the sorcerer subclass you take, that is. But yes, as I've said, I will talk about some multi-classing options that might end up being more powerful at certain levels, at least, as we go along. Starting sorcerer also is great, though, in that it gives us constitution saving throw proficiency to really bolster our concentration checks, which we will definitely want on this build. As for our species, in case you couldn't tell by all of the titles I decided not to use for the build, today, we're going with Centaur. And not because I want to have one of my allies riding on my back into battle. It's simply for the 40 feet of move speed that Centaurs get, which will really come in handy for us, as we will discuss later. That said, if you can't or don't want to use a centaur, whether because you just don't want to or because you can't use species that aren't in the 2024 Player's Handbook, that's fine. I would probably go with the new Goliath instead, since they get at least 35 feet of speed and some other really nice benefits, as we've often discussed. That said, Dragonborn is another one worth considering for their breath weapon, which can be a decent AoE damage dealer, and we are building for AoE damage after all. I'd probably probably go Dragonborn if I were playing at a table that tended to have more than 2 combat encounters per day, especially since we won't really have the spell slots to just keep slinging like fireballs every turn in that case, right? So having another non-spell slot using AoE option would be great. Okay, what about background? As usual, I'm going to say take an old one and customize it, or just create a custom background if you can, but if not, the merchant background should work fine. It gives us the ability score increases that we want and one of the origin feats that I would recommend. But honestly, as for that origin feat, I'm kind of going to just say PYF here, pick your favorite. I know that sounds weird, but none of them are really going to like make or break the build. Merchant gives us lucky, and that's great for the ability to give ourselves advantage on an attack or a saving throw, proficiency bonus times per day. I think my first pick actually though would probably be tough if I could get it, since we're going to be going full sorcerer today, meaning no armor proficiencies and a d6 hit die. Yikes. That's how you balance full spellcasters, right? But yeah, those extra 2 hit points per level from tough will really help with our survivability. But I mean, alert is great, musician is great, and go ahead and PYF. For ability scores, as always, I assume we're going the point buy method and say, let's start with a 15 charisma, take a +2 there, a 15 constitution and a +1 there, and then just a 14 dexterity. We could for sure swap out that con and dex if you value a better AC and like initiative over more hit points, and a better constitution save and thus concentration check. But yeah, I think I'm prioritizing con as my secondary stat personally. As for our equipment, I mean, there's nothing special we need here, just the basics, grab your robe and your clothes and your backpack and a staff probably. We have no armor or weapons that we need, so just, get the basics and then treat your friends with the rest. As a sorcerer 1, we get innate sorcery, and this, like I said, is, one of the features that really gives sorcerers a nice edge new in 2024. It says that twice per day, we can, with a bonus action, buff ourselves for a minute to give us advantage on all sorcerer attack spells and to raise our DC by 1 for our sorcerer spells. And okay, advantage is pretty statistically significant if we're focused on like casting spells that, make spell attacks, right? As we've shown in a number of builds, I think, most recently last week's Catch 22, if you missed it. But is a +1 to our spell DC really that big of a deal as an AoE blaster? I mean, on the one hand, it's not a huge like statistical buff, right? It increases the chance an enemy will fail their save against our spells by 5%. But hey, 5%, every little bit helps. And when it's the difference between an enemy failing or succeeding on their saving throw, it'll feel pretty awesome. As for the spells that we get as a sorcerer 1 here, there are way too many that I want. Acid Splash is a decent little AoE cantrip if we can catch 2 enemies standing next to each other. I really like Lightning Lure for this build to potentially move an enemy into position, right? You do some damage and you pull them towards you, get them lined up just right for an incoming AoE blast. Mind Sliver is a fun way to potentially do some damage and reduce an enemy saving throw. For leveled spells, initially I'm probably just focusing on defense here. Mage Armor to give us a 13 AC plus our dexterity, right? So 15 for us right now. Not amazing, but not terrible, especially if we have the shield spell too, so that we can use our reaction to raise our armor class by 5 until our next turn when we get hit, right? Potentially causing that attack to miss and more. And yeah, Absorb Elements would be nice for a reaction to get resistance to elemental damage. That said, if you're looking for control, Sleep is your go-to spell as a sorcerer, and don't believe the naysayers. It's a pretty decent little spell. Worse than it used to be at level 1 and maybe level 2, but a lot better otherwise. Burning Hands is your best multi-target damage dealer to hit enemies in a 15-foot cone, not a very big AoE, right? With 3d6 of fire damage, half on a save. And then, there's Silvery Barbs, which is amazing and not at all overpowered. Don't listen to the mob. You know who is totally overpowered though? And also just as cute and adorable as the Silvery Barbs mob, my channel members and patrons. You guys, quick shout out. Thank you so much for your support. I could not do what I do without you. Thank you. If you're not a member or a patron, I would love it if you would just consider becoming one. If you check the video description, there's a link on how to do that, and it details all of the little perks that you get by becoming a supporter in that way. And yeah, I give all of my like channel perks to any member or patron that signs up at the silver level or higher. It's just a couple bucks a month. I just ask that you pay what you feel you can afford and what you think it's worth. Those perks include access to the library of write-ups that I do for each of my builds, access to the community Discord, and access to the monthly live Q&A hangout sessions. But if you can't or don't want to, support the channel in that way, that's fine. Watching, liking, subscribing, sharing with your friends, all of those things really help support the channel too, so thanks. At level 2, we get Font of Magic, our sorcery points, of which we get 1 per sorcerer level. They reset on a long rest, and we can use them to create more spell slots or, vice versa, but also for the amazing, wonderful metamagic options, of which we get 2 now, and there are 2 big standouts for us. Quicken Spell, of course, so that we can spend 2 sorcery points to cast a spell with a casting time of an action as a bonus action instead, amazing, and arguably even better, the now very improved Careful Spell. So we can spend 1 sorcery point to make it so that the AoE spell we cast doesn't affect our allies. They automatically succeed on the saving throw if they're caught in the blast, and now take no damage on a successful save if they otherwise would take half. This makes Evocation Wizards super sad because it's so much better than their Sculpt Spells feature, right? Sure, Careful Spell has a cost, but it works on any spell, not just evocation ones, including things like Hypnotic Pattern and Fear, right? It makes me super happy. Sorry, not sorry, Evokers. At level 3, we get our Sorcerer subclass, and we are going with the best subclass in the whole game for multi-target damage. No, I'm not talking about Draconic Sorcerers, I'm talking about Divine Souls. And the main reason they are better than everyone at multi-target damage, in my opinion, is for the ability you get right off the bat here, Divine Magic, which not only gives you a free cleric spell, depending on your character's alignment, but more importantly, basically gives you access to both the sorcerer and the cleric spell list. I mean, speaking of wizards having the better spell list, I think you could make a strong argument that Divine Souls have an even better one. There's not a ton of overlap between sorcerer or wizard spells and cleric spells. And while clerics might not have the best spell list in the game or anything, combining it with the sorcerers makes for a sweet doozy of a list. Yeah, sure, lore bards arguably still beat them all, but regardless, this is going to do wonderful things for us. Now, I will say that, again, if you can't or don't want to play with older, non-2024 Player's Handbook content, then Draconic Sorcerer works great here, thanks to the fact that they can eventually get extra damage to 1 elemental damage type, and yeah, maybe especially if you went Dragonborn instead of Centaur for your species to really like double down on the dragon theme, right? Plus, yeah, they get some nice additional durability too. Or I will say, yes, Light Cleric would be a great option to do instead of, Sorcerer here, if you can't play with Divine Soul, for reasons that we'll get into in a couple of levels. But assuming that we are going Divine Soul, we also get the wonderful Favored by the Gods feature here, which lets us add 2d4 to a failed attack or save once per short rest, and that's just always awesome. As for second level spells to take here, as usual, there are too many that I want, especially with access to the cleric spell list. So Guidance, Healing Word, and or Cure Wounds. Bless is a fantastic buff for concentration here. Dragon's Breath is a nice concentration-based AoE option. Aid, Misty Step, Hold Person, Lesser Restoration, Mirror Image is a fantastic defensive buff. Prayer of Healing is a nice little heal and like free short rest. But the one I will make like special mention of here is Rhyme's Binding Ice. I don't talk about this spell much, but I think we'll actually get a little use out of it, at least at these early levels. Like Burning Hands, it's a cone of damage, right? But it's much bigger. It's a 30-foot cone instead of 15. The damage as a second level spell is almost identical to Burning Hands. 3d8 of cold damage instead of what would be 4d6 of fire. But Binding Ice has a fantastic like bonus rider in that enemies who fail their save against it are also encased in ice, reducing their speed to 0 for an entire minute, and no additional save either if they fail that first one, though a friend of theirs could use their action to break them out of the ice, but now, someone's wasted their action. It's a fantastic spell, really. One note, it allows for a Constitution save instead of a Dexterity save that Burning Hands gives, right? But you know what? Especially in the new 2024 monster manual and at these early levels, the average monster's con save isn't much better than the average monster's dex save. At some CRs, dex is higher on average, so, hooray for options. At level 4, we get our first general feat, and I think I take Warcaster. It raises our charisma to 18, which is great. It gives us advantage on concentration checks, amazing, especially since we have con save proficiency already. And sure, even lets us cast a spell as an opportunity attack when an enemy leaves our reach, right? And it's nice to be able to do something useful when that situation arises, assuming that we're not using our reaction, which we just might be. But anyways, it's a great feat. I'm a lot less mad about the Warcaster tax than I used to be. At level 5, we get Sorceress Restoration, which lets us once per day, after a short rest, recover used sorcery points equal to half our sorcerer level, rounded down, right? More sorcery points, great. But then we get the vaunted 3rd level spells. And this is where things get really good for us as an AoE blaster, and the build really kind of comes together. To be fair, that's kind of the case for all full casters, right? But there are plenty of fantastic spells to choose from here. Aura of Vitality is one of the best heal spells in game. Fear, Hypnotic Pattern, and Slow, that trifecta of fabulous control options. Counterspell, of course, Revivify, so that you can resurrect an ally if they happen to die. And yeah, how awesome is it to have some really fantastic support options in addition to those delicious sorcerer ones? But the spells that are most important to us as a Master Blaster are, of course, Fireball, so that we can do 8d6 fire damage in a 20-foot radius sphere, or Lightning Bolt if you need a line instead of a sphere, right? But also, the main reason that Divine Souls are the best AoE damage dealers in the game, we could get Spirit Guardians here via the Cleric spell list. Oh, the spell is amazing, and yeah, arguably even better in 2024. You cast it as an action, it requires concentration, and causes protective spirits to float about you 15 feet in every direction. When an enemy either enters the spell's area for the first time on a turn, or, new to 2024, you cause the spell's area to enter their space, or they end their turn in the area, then the enemy takes 3d8 radiant or necrotic damage, half on a save. And that scales up by a d8 for every level spell that you upcast it. They also have their move speed halved when they're in the area, a nice little bonus. So, right, this means that we can now essentially weaponize our movement. And it's why I wanted to go Centaur so badly, because it will be important for us to get that Spirit Guardian's aura over as many enemies on our turn as possible. At level 6, Divine Souls just get empowered healing. It says that whenever we or an ally within 5 feet roll dice to determine the healing that a spell specifically restores, we can spend a sorcery point to reroll any number of those dice one time. It's pretty meh, but I suppose it will be worth it if you or a friend just roll a ton of ones on a heal or something. Okay. At level 6, it is time for our first damage report. So let's talk blasting tactics, yes? I'm going to assume that on round 1, we're using innate sorcery as a bonus action, casting Spirit Guardians with our action, and just running around the battlefield to hit as many enemies as possible. I'm just going to assume that we are getting 3 every turn. On subsequent rounds though, we're going to quicken a blast spell. That'll be Fireball on rounds 2 and 3, since we have 2 more 3rd level spell slots, right? And then Rhymes Binding Ice on round 4. But then with our action, we'd actually just ready it to move again on someone else's turn later in the round with our reaction, so that we can hit those same, I'll assume, 3 enemies with Spirit Guardians. Now, yes, we used this tactic on the Cleric of Chaos build a few months ago, and rules as written, it works. Enemies can take damage from the spell more than once per round, just not more than once on a turn. And when we move with our reaction on someone else's turn, it should work, right? That said, I know that plenty of you find this tactic cheesy or distasteful, or your DM won't allow it, or maybe you want to save your reaction so that you can use the shield spell if needed, etc., etc. And if that's the case, that's fine. Just cast a nice cantrip with your action instead. Or, if you went Dragonborn, use your breath weapon. It wouldn't be quite as much damage, but it's not like it totally invalidates the build or anything either. 2 enemies hit with Acid Splash at this level would take 4d6 total damage. Firebolt would do 2d10 to 1 enemy, but you'd have advantage on the attack with innate sorcery up, right? If you could hit 3 enemies with a Dragonborn breath weapon, you'd do 6d10 total damage here, which is almost as much as getting 3 enemies with Spirit Guardians, right? I'm gonna assume that we're doubling up on Spirit Guardians. Adjust expectations slightly if that's not happening at your table for whatever reason. Now, here's a question to address. Should we actually be using innate sorcery here? We could be doubling up on Spirit Guardians potentially right on round 1, right? Quickening it and then readying our action to move. The average damage over a 4-round combat encounter is a teensy bit higher if you do that on round 1, despite the lower AC that you're gonna have on all of your spells. The main reason for that is because remember, all of these spells still deal half damage on a successful enemy save. So having a DC that's just 1 higher really doesn't move the needle a ton on average. Maybe more importantly, you'd be doing a lot more damage right on round 1 if you didn't spend your bonus action to use innate sorcery, right? Which is probably the better tactical decision. I'm still just going to assume that we're using innate sorcery regardless. The overall numbers are almost identical, and I think we're especially going to want to have it up as often as possible starting just next level. So sure, let's get into the habit now. Feel free to bump these numbers slightly if you aren't using innate sorcery. Now, I usually assume a 50% chance that an enemy succeeds on their saving throw when I crunch numbers for saving throw damage. With innate sorcery, it would feel wrong to me to not give a slight bump compared to that normal 50%, right? So sure, let's assume a 45% chance that the enemies succeed on their save. Thus, averaged over 4 rounds, assuming a 45% chance to save, we would do 102 damage per round to 3 enemies total. And wait, what? I mean, I've never broken the century mark for sustained damage at level 6 before. Not even on a multi-target build. Yikes. But yes, of course, grains of salt, as always. We're using all of our best spell slots. We're burning all of our sorcery points. And using a tactic that some would consider cheesy. What if we just used Dragon's Breath instead of running around with our reaction? 5 points of difference total. So yeah, don't lose your cool, people. It's still an awesome build, even if you don't like the ready your action to move on someone else's turn tactic. And hey, there's always a decent chance that you could get more than 3 enemies in your AoEs, right? So these numbers might be a little sandbagged. Go, Master Blaster, go. Let's see where we can take it next. At level 7, sorcerers now get the sorcery incarnate feature, and for this build, this is freaking amazing. First up, it says that if we are out of innate sorcery uses, we can spend 2 sorcery points to activate it still. Nice. But better yet, while innate sorcery is active, we can use up to 2 of our metamagic options on each spell we cast. And while that's expensive, yeah, being able to both quicken and carefully cast a fireball is kind of huge for us. I was assuming that we would get 3 enemies in the blast range before, but that might not always work out so great in practice, right? Since placing it in a way that hits the most enemies might often mean hitting your friends. Of course, we could have used Careful Spell, but then we couldn't have quickened it, which means that we wouldn't have our action to either, use a Dragon's Breath attack or ready our action to run around with Spirit Guardians up. Well, not anymore. So long as we have the sorcery points and or spell slots to spend, that is. Thank goodness we're going straight sorcerer today because we're gonna need those sorcery points. We're burning through points faster than a lit firecracker fuse. We also get 4th level spells here, and I'm just gonna say PYF. Lots of great ones to choose from as always, but no standout like blast spells, right? But take what's going to bring you the most joy and or versatility. At level 8, we get another feat, and honestly, I think I probably just bump charisma to 20 here. I mean, sure, elemental adept would be nice to let us ignore fire resistance, but one thing that I really love about this build, actually, we're not always going to be throwing fireballs necessarily. What's more, soon we will have a fantastic way to otherwise avoid damage resistance of any elemental damage type if we need to, right? More on that in a minute, but that makes Elemental Adept a lot less important. There are other half charisma feats and, other non-half charisma feats for that matter that are really great. worth considering, but yeah, I'm just gonna cap charisma. At level 9, we get 5th level spells, and speaking of not just slinging fireballs, while sure we could get Greater Restoration as a 5th level spell here for Wonderful Cure All, or Hold Monster to paralyze any enemy, we could also get Synaptic Static, which does psychic damage in a 20-foot sphere, same as Fireball, right? Targets intelligence saves, and even has the nice subtract a d6 from all attacks, ability checks, and concentration saves rider. Such a fantastic spell, and almost as much damage as an upcast Fireball. But Cone of Cold takes just the slightest edge over an upcast Fireball or Lightning Bolt here, doing 8d8 cold damage in a 60-foot cone, though it does target Constitution instead, so I'm just going to assume we're still slinging fireballs, or else I'd feel obligated to bump the enemy's chance at successfully saving at this level, especially. CR9 monsters in the new Monster Manual have a much better con save than dex save on average. Okay, at level 9, it's time for our next damage report. Since last check, the only thing we've really done to increase our AoE damage is just increase our spell slots. I'll assume we're upcasting Spirit Guardians now at the 5th level for 5d8 per enemy per hit, right? Using 2 4th level fireballs to do 9d6 each, and then 1 3rd level fireball for 8d6. We have capped our charisma though, and honestly, giving enemies a 45% chance to make a dexterity or wisdom save for Spirit Guardians, right? With where we're at, that is totally sandbagging it. No way that on average enemies are going to succeed 45% of the time. But I don't really want to change my assumptions either. Just know that if you're really going all out like this, your numbers are very likely going to look even better. Also, let me pause a moment and discuss an alternative build really quick. Especially if you were going to start this character at level 9 or later, you might want to consider going 3 levels of Tempest Cleric, right after probably Sorcerer 5, and maybe even continuing up to Cleric 6. As we've discussed many times, most recently in that Maelstromancer, Sea Druid, Tempest Cleric build, the Tempest Cleric's Channel Divinity that lets you maximize damage on a lightning spell would be pretty awesome here. Not just for Lightning Bolt either. You could have taken the transmuted spell metamagic and turned a fireball into a lightning ball, right? And just really blown the doors off of things. I decided not to go that route today for a few reasons. One, because I just did a healthy heaping of Tempest Cleric right in that build a few weeks ago. Two, going full sorcerer has a lot of perks for us. More sorcery points and quicker access to more powerful blasty spells. The ability to use 2 metamagics on a spell, right? And sure, eventually 9th level spells. But then 3, I kind of loved the idea of not being married to one particular damage type for the build today. I've done a lot of Cryomancer and Lightningmancer and even Firemancer builds before, but never really a Master of the Elements build, so that felt kind of fun and unique. Just know that if you did go Tempest Cleric instead, your numbers at level 9 would look even better than what I'm about to show you. And sure, for that matter, you could even go, say, Draconic Sorcerer instead of Divine Soul with a Lightning focus, right? If you were going to get to Cleric 6 for another use of Channel Divinity and still have Spirit Guardians, right? That, by the time you got there at character level 12, Sorcerer 6, Cleric 6, would be the most AoE damage possible, I think. At least at that level, until we got to 9th level spells, had we just gone full Sorcerer. At which point, straight class retakes the lead. In the end, we're doing plenty of damage, and I think we're better off going the route we did through the early part of the game and then again at late game, so I have no regrets. Anyways, at this point, averaged over 4 rounds of combat, assuming a 45% chance to succeed on saves against our spells, we would do, against 3 enemies, 157 DPR. Yeah, we're level 9. That's still more damage than any build I've ever done to date, in total damage at least, if not damage per enemy, in which case the Maelstromancer still has a slight edge at this level since they were only doing damage to 2 targets instead of 3. Still, the likelihood that we would be hitting more than 3 fairly regularly is pretty high, at least until the enemies just started dying from our onslaught so that there weren't even 3 left to target, right? So, alright, let's see what tier 3 of play looks like. At level 10, we get to pick 2 more metamagic options, which I love. And yes, I would for sure grab Transmuted Spell, even if you didn't go the Tempest Cleric route, because that would let us spend 1 sorcery point to, yes, change the damage type for a spell from Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, Poison, or Thunder into another one of those damage types. And that's just a fantastic way to get around damage resistance and immunity when you need it. For our second option, I think I'm probably taking Empowered Spell. It just lets us re-roll damage dice for a sorcery point, and that might not be worth it most of the time, but if you get a really unlucky roll and just like throw a bunch of 1s and 2s, it'd be nice to have. Nothing worse than a fireball that does like 12 damage, right? Oh, you can also use Empowered Spell even if you've used a different metamagic option on the spell, regardless of whether or not you have innate sorcery going, which is nice. Do I assume that we've got it available when we throw our fireballs or other nukes and add it to the number crunching? Meh. The difference on average to damage is not a massive increase, and the math is complicated enough that I don't want to get the headache from trying to make my number crunching more complicated, so I'm just going to leave it out, but know that it will potentially be a small bump to your average damage, and potentially a nice bump when you roll really crappy. At level 11, we get 6th level spells, and while of course a smart player would use their 6th level spell slot for Hero's Feast, or Mass Suggestion, or heck, maybe even heal for a big lifesaver in combat, a less smart player might take Disintegrate, that spell that's fantastic single target burst damage when it works, but worthless when it doesn't. Nah, we'll make the slightly smarter choice and go Chain Lightning instead. I love this spell so much. It does 10d8 damage, better even than a level 6 fireball, but better yet, just hits like first 1 enemy and then 3 more that are within 30 feet of the first, without having to worry about any friends getting caught in the blast or anything, right? Is like a scalpel. Unfortunately, maybe when you upcast it, it only affects more targets instead of doing more damage. I guess that'll be good sometimes, but it feels rare to me that I'd care that much about hitting 5 enemies with the spell. I don't know. Let's be honest, if I took this spell, I really shouldn't be upcasting it anyways, but I'm not interested in doing what's advisable. I want to blow stuff up as hard as I possibly can. Anyways, at level 12, we get another feat. And, I think I probably grab Resilient Wisdom here, honestly. Our wisdom score sucks. Our wisdom saves are abysmal, and that's a pretty dang important save to be making. Nothing worse than having your nuclear bomb character get mind controlled and start nuking your friends instead, right? Thank goodness we had that favored by the gods, at least. Maybe we should have gone lucky instead of tough on this build. As an alternative, especially if you went Elemental Adept last time, I would consider Telekinetic to get our Charisma to 20. Being able to move an enemy just 5 feet as a bonus action might help you get 1 more baddie in your blast, right? Or, sure, if we're really worried about not getting mind controlled, Mage Slayer is nice to, among other things, let you automatically succeed on a mental save once per short rest. Bump your dexterity with it and, get yourself another half dex feat later, maybe for, 16 dex, better AC, better initiative rolls, etc. Not a terrible idea. At level 13, we get 7th level spells, and, I'm going to say pick your favorite again. Power Word Fortify is just fantastic for support. Reverse Gravity is both a really powerful control spell and also hilarious. I will note, the spell Erupting Earth, which we could have gotten clear back at level 5 since it's a 3rd level spell, actually takes the lead right now for most total damage per target, just barely, since it does d12s and scales by a d12 with upcasting, right? Meaning it would do 7d12 damage as a 7th level spell. The downside is that it's a much smaller area. It's only a 20-foot cube. That said, it deals bludgeoning damage, much less often resisted, and it makes the area difficult terrain, so it could be a decent one to try and slow enemies down with if need be, especially if you've got multiple enemies kind of close together. Though, difficult terrain slows us down too, and, we might need to kind of get in there to get close to enemies and hit them with Spirit Guardians. I actually do love the idea, though, of using this spell to cut their move speed in half via difficult terrain, and then cutting it in half again via Spirit Guardians, meaning they'd move at a quarter speed, at least while they were, in the area of those spells. I don't know, an option worth considering, I think, in the right circumstance. But of course, we like fools, are going to be using that 7th level spell slot to upcast Spirit Guardians for our next damage report, which is now. Since last check, we have increased our control, utility, support, and even defensive options significantly, but the only thing we've done to improve our blasting really is just gain more and better spells and spell slots, which is not nothing. I will assume that yes, we are upcasting Spirit Guardians to now do 7d8 per hit. Then we'd use Chain Lightning with our 6th level spell slot and Cone of Cold with our 2 5th level spell slots. I know I said I wouldn't because it's a con save, but come on. It's cool to be able to use different spells. Pun intended. Just use Fireball if you want. It's seriously like 1.5 points of damage difference, right? Okay, assuming still a 45% chance for the enemy to succeed on their saving throw, averaged over 4 rounds of combat, using the same tactics, we would do 214 DPR. Holy cow. Is this a burst damage build? I mean, kinda, right? Blowing all these big spell slots. But yeah, first time I've ever broken the 200 mark on a sustained damage build in total damage. So that's fun. And hey, we're a full sorcerer with like all kinds of amazing control and support options if we chose to use them instead. So the power and versatility is just off the charts here. Assuming we can stay alive. I hope you've got a good front line. All right, at level 14, we get, as a divine soul, otherworldly wings, which says that as a bonus action, we manifest wings that give us a fly speed of 30 feet, and they just last until we're incapacitated or die. Dude, free flight. Amazing. Especially for a squishy caster like us, should really help us stay out of harm's way more easily most of the time. And yeah, even just like fly over the heads of our enemies, but still stay out of reach and thus hit them with Spirit Guardians. Yeah, it's a 15-foot emanation, so, every direction, vertical, horizontal. It's too bad the fly speed doesn't match our 40-foot centaur speed. Wait, we're a flying centaur. Like a centaur Pegasus. Is there an official fantasy name for such a creature? Look. Terra Centaur. Like a pteranodon. That's awesome. What an image. Okay, at level 15, we get 8th level spells, and I mean, Dominate Monster is amazing. Incendiary Cloud is actually a slightly better damage dealer than Spirit Guardians now for concentration, if you're not doing the whole ready your action to move thing. And it's a huge area and makes the area heavily obscured, which could be cool. Definitely worth considering. 2 potential AoE nuke replacements here, though, as well. Sunburst is awesome in that it covers a whopping 60 radius sphere and does 12d6 radiant damage, rarely resisted, and blinds enemies that fail their save for 1 minute. Annoying that it isn't considered sunlight for vampire purposes, but it does dispel darkness too. In general, if you're gonna blow an 8th level spell slot on like a burst damage nuke, this would probably be your go-to, especially since we can make it a careful spell and almost guarantee to hit every single enemy on the battlefield and potentially blind them, right? The one that looks better on the spreadsheet though, if we keep things apples to apples and just keep assuming 3 enemies at least, is Abidalzim's Horrid Wilting. What a name. It targets a 30-foot cube, way smaller area, right? But then gives a constitution save, same as Sunburst, by the way, so sure, Fireball or Synaptic Static even might be better than either of these. But if they fail their save, creatures take 12d8 necrotic damage. Not the best damage type to be targeting necessarily, and also constructs and undead are immune, but plants and water elementals have disadvantage on the save. So yeah, if I were using this when crunching numbers, I'd go this route. But, know your options, right? Use what's best for the situation, and that's probably Dominate Monster. Okay, at level 16, we get yet another feat, and I mean, I kind of just want to say PYF. I'm probably bumping Constitution, I think, honestly, to improve my survivability and saving throws, but others I've mentioned are worth considering. Or sure, just flat bumping Wisdom or even Dexterity. Heck, maybe consider Metamagic Adept to get more metamagic options and, sorcery points. We probably don't need them by this level, especially because at level 17, we get 2 more metamagic options, and I'm just going to say PYF here, but I think I probably grab at least Subtle Spell for sure to cast spells without needing components, and I mean, what, Heightened Spell? For those times that you're throwing down like a save or suck spell and want to give the enemy disadvantage against it, right? Dominate Monster comes to mind. Coupled with Silvery Barbs, and you're almost for sure causing a failed saving throw. Unless they've got legendary resistance. We are level 17. Anyways, we also get here finally to the pinnacle of spells. Yes, 9th level spells. And that means we can take no, not wish. That's cheating. I want Meteor Swarm, of course. The ultimate blaster spell. 40d6 of fire and bludgeoning damage in a 40-foot radius sphere. Ah ha ha. Honestly, this is the main reason I wanted to go full sorcerer on this build. But how cool would it be to take 3 levels of Tempest Cleric now if we were going to level 20, right? So that we could transmute at least the 20d6 of fire damage into lightning and do full damage on that portion of the spell, right? Answer, so cool. That would be like 190 damage to every single target that it hits on average. Lols. I guess we'll just have to settle for 140 damage from it instead. Lesai. But this then brings us to our final damage report. Since last check, again, we're just casting bigger and better spells. We will upcast Spirit Guardians to 8th level. On round 2, we will quicken Meteor Swarm before readying our action to move, right? On round 3, we'll use our 7th level slot for Erupting Earth, assuming I can get 3 targets in that 20-foot cube. That might be a stretch, but as usual, the difference in damage between this and, say, Chain Lightning or an upcast Cone of Cold or even an upcast Fireball is almost nothing. And I do like the difficult terrain thing, so sure. And then on round 4, it's Chain Lightning. Cool? Oh, and for the record, our spell DC with innate sorcery active is 20 right now. Yeah, a 20 DC. Giving enemies a 45% chance to make their save is really generous. Then again, at this level, lots of enemies are going to have legendary resistance, so maybe not. If you're getting a boss to blow one of their legendary resistances to still take half damage on a nuke, that's a huge win for your team. Anyways, assuming the 45% chance to save averaged over 4 rounds here, using the above tactics, we would do 300 damage per round. Holy crap. Yeah, 300 even. So, okay. Thus we see the martial caster divide made manifest, right? I mean, of course, that divide isn't just due to damage, I know that. It's other stuff, but let's talk about it all in the final thoughts. The tier score for this build, if you just take the average damage they do at each of the 4 damage reports, average it into one big number, you get a 193. And yeah, that just destroys any sustained damage build for total damage, and it's not even close. But does that make this my hardest hitting build ever? I mean, it depends, right? Kinda, but only for total damage. And some builds would outperform it even then with like more combat encounters in a day. And yeah, there's something to be said for doing a little less total damage, but, you know, a lot more focused on a single enemy, right? Taking one enemy out of the fight right at the beginning, potentially, instead of just, you know, leaving everyone alive but bloodied or whatever so that they can all do stuff on their turn to hurt us instead of one of them being dead. We've talked about this before. No need to rehash. I love this build. It's the only time I've ever done a straight class sorcerer. Crazy, right? But if you're looking to AoE nuke, no surprise, it's hard to beat a straight class sorcerer. That said, I think if I were playing this build in game, sure, I might start off with like a level in Artificer to get con save proficiency still, but also armor and shield proficiency without hurting spell slot progression. Or, you know, just take Cleric like at level 2, even if I'm not going for the Tempest thing, just for defensive purposes. You'd need a 13 Wisdom in that case, or a 13 Intelligence for Artificer, right? You'd have to probably lower your Constitution, but probably be worth it to pick up a big buff to your AC. But I don't know. On the other hand, just being like a super glass cannon like this, I love it. I love the high risk, high reward, if you didn't know that about me. Yeah, I mean, so get your team to play together, right? Stand close to your paladin who's hopefully got warding bond on you. Get a healer to keep you on your feet so that you can just stand back in true artillery fashion and just rain down death across the battlefield. And like I've said, I mean, so much support power here too. You could actually really be the party's main support if you wanted. Heal like crazy, control the battlefield if you want, but then when the mood strikes you, or the situation calls for it, blow them all to smithereens. So that's the build for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. I had so much fun putting this one together, as I usually do. I love you guys. Thank you so much for all that you do for me and for this channel. You are the very best. I hope you have a fantastic day and a really great week. And if you don't, I am really hoping that you'll hang in there. Don't give up. Please do good and be kind. And I hope I see you again really soon. But until then, take care. Bye. And there it goes, my last chance for peace. It lay me down, but I get no release. And I say I try to keep awake. I try to swim beneath. I try to keep awake, but I can feel this narcolepsy slide to another nightmare. Ooh, I am on a third eye blind kick today. But here's a question for the third eye blind fans among us. I'm looking at you, 90s kids. Like, their first album, their debut album, one of the great albums of all time. If you have not listened to it, I'm telling you, every song, with maybe one or two exceptions, total banger. But, like, after that album, they kind of drop off a cliff musically, my opinion. There's still some good songs on their subsequent albums, but nothing close to what they did on that first one. You tell me, if you're a fan, what's their best song after their first album? I want to see it in the comments. How'd you like to be so dang good? It increases the... It's not... But I mean, well, let's just say, on the one hand, get them for... if guidance, right? For some, so just say it's a fan that some would consider flying centaur. Lols. I can't say that without a D.